Communication. We hear about it all the time and know how important it is to our success in business and life. But we rarely look at if we are repelling or attracting people with the communication that we use. That's what we're talking about today. How to level up and not just have good communication, but to have magnetic communication. I'm Clara Capano, and this is Clarity in Action. Welcome to Clarity in Action. This is the show where we have real conversations that are going to challenge your perspectives and drive real action. So if you are tired of holding back and you're ready to make bold moves, this is the show for you. Join us as we are going to take you from confusion into clarity. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Clarity in Action. This one you're going to want to take notes for because we are talking about one of the most important skill sets for all of us, both personally and professionally, and that is communication. But not just regular communication. We're going to be talking magnetic communication. Right. And to help me with this, I have one of my dear friends. We met at a speaking engagement and just have become fast friends. So I have a fellow speaker, leadership architect, and just all around cool guy. So Erik, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. So good to finally be here.
I know. We had some fun when we were on the road
we
at
did.
a conference together and did some work side by side as we were reaching out and building our empires.
No doubt about it. That's a great way to put it.
I love it. So, we're going to be diving into this concept of magnetic communication. But before we get there, I would just love to ask, we all have that moment, that aha moment. I always call it my moment of clarity. So what was your moment where you realized the importance and the impact of communication?
Well, I think looking back when I was in the Marine Corps, I was an air traffic controller, and the focus on communication was everything. The words that we chose, the directions, the commands that we gave, everything had an important message behind it, and lives were at stake. So, really up in that control tower, I started to realize how important communication is. Mm-hmm. That was my first aha moment. But then in the business sector, once I left the Marine Corps, I realized that nobody's really training on communication. Yeah. People will rank it at the highest levels. In fact, I'll ask business leaders, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is communication? And they'll say, it's an 11, it's a 12, it's everything. And then I say, how would you rank your current communication training program? And they say, we don't have one. Mm-hmm. And that's almost every single industry, every single business and organization I've ran into. They rank it with the highest levels conceptually.
Right.
But then what I call steptually, they have no actions in place to help their people to communicate better, whether it's about their products and services, their workflow, or just communicate magnetically to help attract people and bring them together and create that cohesion that we need.
You are so spot on with this. And I see this so many times just with all areas. People will say, oh, balance is important. My family's important. But again, they don't have any real strategy.
That's right.
And almost every time, I would love to get your thoughts on this, but for me, almost every time there's a misstep, I can always pinpoint it back to a miscommunication.
That's right. I mean, as a business coach, I'll go in, analyze businesses, the leadership team, their workflow. We eventually get around to mistakes, errors, problems, issues. And you're right. You can usually track everything back to some level of poor communication. There was a misunderstanding. There was a misinterpretation. Somebody didn't provide enough information. Somebody provided too much information. Somebody didn't provide relevant information. And so, or somebody just didn't check their emails. They just deleted it. So there's an epidemic of people deleting emails from other team members, and that's crazy too. But the reality of it is that if you can improve communication, you can raise, you can level up, raise the bar in so many areas in your organization. If you just get people speaking the same language, and that's why I wrote the book, The Communication Movement, because I feel that communication is magnetic, and there's a lot of ways that we communicate, but we have the opportunity to communicate in a way that attracts people like magnets.
Right.
And when we're not focused on it, we could unintentionally repel people, just like magnets do. Mm-hmm. So I believe that all forms of communication have magnetic properties. And once we start to see it that way, then we can start to be really focused on, what are we saying? How are we communicating? And is it magnetic or not? Did I attract or did I repel with that form of communication?
Yeah. So let's dive deeper into this idea of magnetic
Yeah.
communication. What would be some examples of communication that attracts versus repels?
Well, let me share this because this will really help with it. And that's a great question because once people go, wow, it's magnetic. Am I attracting or repelling? I like to share an example with them. If you've ever watched TV and you watch a trucker movie or a TV show or a first responder show, sometimes you'll see those guys and gals on the CB radios of the past, right? And they'll say things like over and out. And we hear it so much that we repeat it even though it's a contradictory term. So in the real world of aviation or first responders or the military, over and the word out mean two different things. Over means, Clara, I'm finished speaking. I'm awaiting a reply from you. Out means, Clara, I'm finished speaking. Please do not reply. When we say over and out, we're saying, Clara, I'm finished speaking. Please reply, but don't reply. But we hear it so much, we've accepted it that it's the truth, but it actually means two different things.
Okay.
And so when I look at examples of magnetic communication, sometimes I start with words. I will always ask leaders or business professionals, are words important? And they say yes. And
Mhm.
I say, you're right, because they have meaning, people are interpreting them. I feel that in the workplace, sometimes we're using words that repel more than we're anticipating and we could attract. Case in point, I I do not like the word change. And I know there's people that say, well, I've fallen in love with change. Well, as a leader, the majority of the world hates the word change because it means different.
Right.
It means, in their mind, more work. It's very scary to them. It can create a lot of fear and anxiety and resistance. So when leaders are coming in and go, I've got this great change to make, they're automatically repelling people unintentionally. What I choose to use is the word enhance. So I always say change nothing, enhance everything. Because as leaders, we want buy in, we want people to be engaged. And so when we say we're going to enhance our systems, we're going to enhance our sales structure, we're going to enhance workflow, then people look at it as there's an enhancement. It's becoming better. It's an improvement, and we create buy-in. So just being selective in our words, once we acknowledge that words are important, we can actually make better word choices. And that's just two of them right there: change versus enhance.
And I really like that by just being more purposeful and intentional in the
Yeah.
words that we use and having a little bit more thought to this. I would
Yeah.
love to get your thoughts on what listening does and what role does listening play in magnetic communication, because we use the words, but we also have to make sure that we are listening too.
Well, the listening side is really important because when we listen, it typically means that we're giving them a voice,
Mhm.
that their communication is important. I feel that leaders really need to be prepared with questions to ask. Questions force us as leaders to listen to our people. So they may ask questions about, how do you feel about our culture? What words would describe culture to you? What would make our culture better? How can we improve workflow around here? What enhancements would you like to see? And then just let them talk. And when we listen to them, we may realize that they're saying some things that push people away unintentionally also, especially if organizations aren't training on communication. And then typically what they train on is how to speak about their products and services. But I'm talking just teaching them how to have dialogue with each other, some of the words that are acceptable and not acceptable. Asking questions allows us to hear where they're coming from, allows us to hear if they're using magnetic communication. Sometimes I'll talk to people about how are you doing with your team? And they'll say things like, well, I'm having trouble managing my team. I go, whoa, okay, stop. Because I believe that we should lead people, but we should manage work.
Mhm.
So a lot of it is when we then reverse those and we start managing people, causes a lot of resentment and frustration and fear and all of those things. So the question side is very important, but I don't think enough leaders show up thinking about questions that they can ask of their people, and one, just to get to know them better.
Absolutely. And that's
You
such
know?
a key thing. And I know, when I would lead people and was running meetings and things, I love to take time to prepare for it ahead of time. When I was sitting down one on one, even when I was doing more individual one on one
Yeah.
coaching, I would take time beforehand. Today,
Well,
before ours, I prepared questions I wanted to ask you. I may or may
yeah.
not go into all of them, but you're going to be so much more thoughtful in the way that you connect, when you
Well,
take time to think about these things and prepare.
well, you bring up a good point. There's a lot of leaders don't prepare for meetings. They just show up to them.
Right.
So they act like they're prepared, but the whole audience knows they're not prepared. What I like about what you're saying is that you have to justify why we have meetings. And you can't just say, well, because we've always had one. If it's only the leader speaking, that really could be an email. You could
Hmm.
just send that same information out. But if you're engaging your people, that becomes a greater meeting. And to your point, if you can establish some questions to get their involvement, their engagement, and 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 get their buy-in in a meeting. Great meetings are awesome. Nobody wants less great meetings. They just want less of the meetings that suck.
Hmm.
So,
So
you know,
true. Yeah.
yeah, and you got to get them engaged. You got to ask questions. You got to get their insights and show them that they're valued. That's very magnetic in an attractive way.
Exactly. So I want to go back to something that you brought up early on in our conversation. And this was the idea of having a communication training program.
Yeah.
What does that even look like? What are some of the key components in a good quality communication training program?
So I believe there's different levels of communication training. We need to train people on what's acceptable to say in the workplace and what's not acceptable to say. And not just as it happens, but when I was an air traffic controller, they taught us what certain words meant, what certain phrases meant, what not to say, and what to say. And that was basically to do our, be tactically proficient at our job.
Hmm.
In the workplace, I really feel that some of the starting points can be ways to improve poor communication. That here's what's acceptable and not acceptable. Now, there's obviously some words out there that we won't use on your podcast that we know shouldn't be said in the workplace, and that might get you fired.
Hmm.
If I walked around dropping bombs in a workplace, I might get canned. And that's understandable. On the flip side of that, there's a lot of things that people are saying in the workplace that create a very negative environment. It brings morale down, it pushes people away. And here's the big one. A lot of times people walk in and say, hey, how you doing? And somebody will say, I'm just living the dream. And they say it in a very negative context, but it's allowed.
Yeah.
And so people will walk in saying, I'm just living the dream. She's just got a case of the Mondays.
Mhm.
That's not my job. That's above my pay grade. I believe that if people are our greatest asset and if we value culture, we have to be careful of what's said in there. So some of the things that I recommend when I create training programs for organizations is you got to determine what you want to hear more of and what you want to hear less of.
Mm.
As soon as you ask people that, they will say, well, I want to hear less of it's not my job. I want to hear less of it's not my fault and things like that. I got a case of the Mondays or, just living the dream. The things they want to hear more of is how can I help? What do you need? I got that. If we're not identifying it, people can't really buy in on it. And if we don't course correct, we're actually accepting that and saying it's okay to say these things here. So I feel that the initial stage of training really is what do you want to hear more of and less of? Because every organization has communication issues.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it is just sometimes the way people are talking. Maybe they're lacking tact.
Hmm.
So we have to teach them how to be more tactful. Uh, the other thing is that I believe that in addition to training on our products and services, there's also the ability to train on certain leadership tactics. Do we want to get them speaking like leaders? We also want to teach them how to speak about our mission, our vision, our core values. The ironic part is there's a collection of words, right? So here's words put together to form a mission statement, and then most people don't know the mission statement. So it's like, do you have a mission statement? Half of the people in corporate America say, I think so. I think we do. But it's impossible to hit mission if you don't know it. So we can train on what's acceptable to say and not say in the workplace. We can talk about how we speak and communicate about our mission, our vision, our core value, our identity, our mottos and taglines. I also think that we can talk about, how are we speaking as leaders? What are some of the words that we're using, the traits, the principles? How do we get people engaged?
Hmm.
How do we convey the message that certain things aren't tolerated? Most people don't even know how to issue consequences in the workplace because it's not talked about.
Right.
They might not know here's how you do a verbal write-up. Here's how you, not that we want to show up and do those things, but
Yeah.
they don't even teach that. They just hope people figure it out.
Exactly.
So I think there's also a way to assess communication. And there's factors that I talk about in the book, like on a scale of 1 to 10, is communication timely in your organization? Is it relevant?
Mhm.
Is it understood? Do people, follow up with the communication? So I think there's a lot of categories of communication that can be ranked in an organization and then worked on.
Absolutely. As a high performer, I love to start my day with two critical things: one, time with my dog, and two, coffee. And not just good coffee, but great coffee. I am proud to have Fetch Coffee Roasters as a sponsor for Clarity in Action, not only because they have great coffee with fun names such as Muddy Paws and Squirrel, but also for every bag of coffee that they sell, they donate $1 to helping dogs in need. I mean, how much better could it get than that? In fact, they've raised over $25,000 in their local communities. So go over to fetchroasters.com and grab your coffee and share some love with some dogs in your community too. So let's talk about this idea of course correction.
Yeah.
So you've sat down, you've decided, okay, we don't want to hear any more of this. We want more of this. How, as a leader, do you then communicate that
Yeah.
and set the new standard? How do you correct that old behavior and start to work on implementing the new one?
Great question. In fact, I consider poor communication an out. So there's important things that are ins, there's priority things, those are ons, and then there's negative things, and those are outs. And when we want to remove an out, let's just say we want to remove negativity or negative talk, or even just one phrase like "I'm just living the dream." You want to remove that. I would recommend that leaders team up with other leaders. Don't try and go at it alone. Team up, and you have to have the all company or all department dialogue. You have to announce to everybody, hey, here's what we've been hearing a lot lately. We've been hearing this phrase, "I'm just living the dream." It sounds negative, and it's actually impacting culture. For the good of the team, we no longer want to hear that phrase said inside of the workplace or outside for that matter. The very first step is always letting people know this behavior or this dialogue is no longer tolerated. You have to announce it to all in an all hands meeting or a company wide meeting, or announce it to everyone. But then when somebody violates it, then you can actually course correct them individually. So I would say, well, Clara, remember when we had that meeting and we said, hey, we're no longer saying that phrase. I'm not sure if you realize it, but today when you said that, here's the impact it has on our team. So I never say, I don't like what you're saying. I say, here's the negative impact that it had on the people around you, because we have to put the good of the team
Yeah.
kind of above the feelings of the individual, right? Where they just feel they can say anything. We have to let them know it impacts people. We have to let them know that when they say that, it's pushing people away, it's creating negativity, all of those things. And I know that sometimes this is hard for leaders, but part of the communication training is learning how to course correct people the right way. And in a way that also empowers them to make that shift. There's
Mhm.
the real art form there. That's the balance you're striving for, is that you can actually course correct them and they say thank you to you, and it's completely doable.
Absolutely. So oftentimes the course correction needs to start with the leader. So if a leader has made a misstep, they've been doing good, they've been doing these things, but then all of a sudden they just blow it.
Yeah.
What is a way that they can come back from poor communication?
So one of the things when I do leadership development, one of my core foundational truths is that we should strive for progress, not perfection.
My favorite saying.
Yeah, and so when you have people in a workplace that they're like, "Well, I'm just a perfectionist." Again, there's a phrase that actually pushes people away because you can't be perfect. We already know it. So when you say it, it it's a well-intended lie, and we know it. So if somebody's listening right now and they're like, "Well, I'm just a perfectionist," you need to rephrase thinking that. So when a leader has that, it's very hard to apologize and be vulnerable when you tell everybody you're striving for perfection. Not to mention, if you tell people you're striving for perfection, for perfection, the moment you screw up, they're gonna be like, "See, you're not one." So I also look at it as it's a great caveat for us to be able to phrase it. Hey, listen, sometimes we make mistakes that weren't intentional, and then we have to own those, and we have to communicate in a way to the team that says, "Hey, when I did this, I was wrong." But you've got to be able to explain why. You have to be able to tie it back in and said, when I spoke to Clara this way, or when I addressed the team this way, this didn't represent our mission. It didn't represent our core values. It didn't represent, you can't just say, because I felt so. You got to tie it back into a greater good. And so a lot of times when we're course correcting ourselves or somebody on the team, usually they violated something in the core values, the mission, the vision, the overall essence of our culture. And so we have to tie it into something that's much bigger than just us so that people have the buy-in, right?
That's
Because if you just say, well, Erik, I don't like the way you said that, I might say, well, I don't care what you think,
right.
but that could be a comeback. But if you said, hey, we have integrity as one of our core values, and when you said this, you violated that, that would hit a nerve with me.
And that is why it's so important to have these core values or mission
Yeah,
statement, but also bring it back to how are we implementing these on a regular
100%.
basis.
Yeah,
And I also really appreciate the idea that you talked about the perfection. When you throw that
yeah,
out there, nobody can achieve it,
that's right. I
and
mean, yeah, that's a bad one to throw out there. Like,
Mhm.
you should strive for perfection, not just getting better, but you should be perfect in everything you do, which is easy to say when you've been doing the same task for 10 years and then here's a new guy or a new gal and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to move forward here. So you can actually stifle progression by
Absolutely.
using, again, it's a well-intended repulsive word.
It's so
You know?
true. So,
Yeah.
if there was one message or one nugget that you would want people to come away with from our conversation today, what is that one nugget that you think more than ever they need to just hear?
Everything we do and don't do as leaders, everything we say and don't say as leaders sends a message. Every time we step into that workplace and we communicate, we are sending messages. Somebody might say, well, I didn't intend that message. Doesn't matter. It was interpreted. So we have to be very crystal clear. We have to have clarity
Mhm.
on our messaging because somebody's interpreting it. And we have to understand that. And now, again, you got to just make progress. It's not perfection. You won't please everybody, but it's also not in your job description to be a people pleaser,
Right.
but it should be in there to unify your team. And so I think that once we have situational awareness that everything we do and say, everything we don't do and say sends a message, it allows us to be more in control of our communication.
Beautiful. I love that. So,
Yeah.
Eric, I know you have so much going on. You are a successful global speaker. You've written books. You have workshops that you do. So, tell us a little bit about what's next for Eric. What are you working on now?
Yeah, what's great is I do a lot on the coaching side in addition to speaking. So I'll go in, I'll work with organizations from mom and pop shops to Fortune 500s. And we've had a tremendous amount of requests for some of the content that we have to be online. So we just launched the Think Great Academy. So it's thinkgreatacademy.com. And on there, we have our first masterclass. So I have about almost a 6-hour masterclass on leadership, about 90 videos and hours of content and downloadable resources. And that was a big venture for us. So we just launched last week. So very excited about that.
That is so cool. And I know that you'll have great success. What a timely topic, and one that's going to
Yeah.
really deliver value and just help so many of us out there. And Eric, I really have enjoyed getting to know you and talking, because you at your heart, you just want to help people, and you see the idea that we can get better through
100%.
intentionality, through authenticity, through being
Yep.
vulnerable. And you bring such a great, fresh perspective to people that I
Thank you.
just really have appreciated and value so much from building our friendship together. And I have one last final question for you before I
Yeah.
let you go today. And that is, sitting where you sit today, learning everything that you've learned up until now, how do you define success for yourself?
Unsolicited testimonials. Hands down. When somebody reaches out and said, thank you for impacting my life. Thank you for that message. I needed that. There just really is nothing greater than you got on stage or you met with somebody and you impacted their life and they felt compelled to send you out a note or a card or just email you and just tell you about it. That to me is true success.
I
The
love
more of those I get, the more successful I feel.
Fantastic. Well, Eric, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm just wishing you all the continued success, and I can't wait to
Thank you.
see you again.
You are the best and an amazing host, and I hope to come back on with another topic.
Love it. Fantastic. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Communication is always something that I find very fascinating. It actually was my major, both in my undergraduate and in my graduate degree. And so many of the things that Eric talked about, I think we really need to just unpack a little bit. This idea of being more thoughtful. One of the things that he brought up that I think is so important for us to notate is this idea of the words we are using. Just those simple words like the word change, how just by speaking that has just an innate ability to shut people down. So when you're going through your presentations, your meetings, your topics, your emails, maybe do a quick scan. Are you using words that are going to open people up, build safety and belonging, and attract them to the true message? Again, the intentionality. Nobody's perfect, but prepare for your communication because you know the message is coming through. And we need to do our best at helping to ensure that the message is being interpreted the right way. We can never fully control it, but the more thought we put behind it, the better. He talked about this idea of looking at your culture, looking at your group right now. What are you hearing? And are those messages you want to hear more of or you want to hear less of? And creating some standards in what you're doing. And just the idea of just really making sure that, you're working with others. Have other people audit what you're saying. Look to others. Follow others that are having good communication, model them. I love the idea that he said team up with other leaders so you can work with each other. Talked about meetings. Nobody wants just another meeting. They want value in the meetings. And a lot of time that means bringing in more belonging, more interaction, more engagement. So what are questions? What are things that we can do to unite people and get them to open up? So communication, it is one of the best skills. And as leaders, we have an obligation to set the tone for quality communication. So let's turn it up and let's start learning how to lead by having more magnetic communication. So thank you so much. I really encourage you to share this with your team members, with other leaders that you work with. Come back, re-listen to it on your own and go through it again. And just make sure that you are learning how to level up in your own skill sets. Please make sure to keep following and sharing the show so that we can grow and have more of these fantastic episodes. And we will see you next time. I'm Clara Capano, your host for Clarity in Action.